I sat in that fancy restaurant booth, my worn church dress feeling out of place among all the silk and diamonds, watching my son Terrence laugh with his rich friends. The crystal chandelier above us cost more than my monthly Social Security check, I'm sure. My hands, wrinkled and spotted with age, rested quietly in my lap as I listened to them talk about their vacation homes and luxury cars like I wasn't even there. "Mom, why don't you just have some water?" Terrence said, his voice dripping with fake sweetness, as he pushed the bread basket away from me. His friends, 3 men and 2 women, all dressed like they were going to meet the president, laughed behind their wine glasses. "You're too poor to eat with us. This menu is a bit out of your price range." The words hit me like a slap, but I kept my face calm. 72 years on this earth taught me how to hold my peace. I reached for my water glass with a steady hand and took a small sip, watching my only son over the rim. The son I'd worked 3 jobs to put through college. The son who used to hold my hand in church every Sunday. The son who'd forgotten where he came from. "Terrence, baby," I said softly. "That's not very kind." He rolled his eyes. "Mother, please, don't embarrass me in front of my colleagues. If you can't afford to be here, you should have said so before we came." Before I could respond, the waiter appeared with champagne bottles I knew cost more than my rent. I watched them order lobster, Wagyu beef, the most expensive items on the menu. My stomach growled quietly, but I said nothing, just smiled and sipped my water. What Terrence didn't know, what none of them knew, was that earlier that morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I'd signed the papers making me the new owner of this very restaurant. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how I got here. Before we continue, if this story resonates with you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next story. 3 months ago, everything was different. I was living in my small 2-bedroom house on Maple Street, the same house I'd bought 40 years ago when my husband Jerome was still alive. It wasn't much, but it was paid for, and it was mine. Every Sunday I'd cook a big meal, collard greens, fried chicken, mac and cheese, cornbread, the works, hoping Terrence and his wife Vanessa would come by with my grandbabies. They stopped coming 2 years ago, and "We're just so busy, Mom," Terrence would say over the phone, his voice distracted. "The kids have activities. Vanessa has her charity events. You understand?" I understood all right. I understood that my son had married into money and decided his mama from the old neighborhood wasn't good enough anymore. Vanessa came from one of those families, you know the type, where everybody went to private schools and spent summers in Martha's Vineyard. Her daddy owned half the commercial real estate downtown. When Terrence married her 15 years ago, I watched my baby boy slowly transform into someone I barely recognized. But I still loved him. That's what mothers do. The change started small. First, he stopped coming to church with me. Then he stopped calling on Sundays. Then the visits got shorter and shorter until they stopped altogether. My grandbabies, Amara and Jordan, 8 and 6 years old. I barely knew them anymore. They'd come to my house once, and Amara had looked at my furniture like it was from a museum. "Grandma, why is everything so old?" she'd asked. Vanessa had shushed her, but the damage was done. The real trouble started when Jerome's life insurance finally paid out. See, my husband had been a postal worker for 35 years before he passed. Good, honest work. He'd kept up his insurance policy faithfully, and when he died 5 years ago, the money went into probate because of some paperwork issues. I'd almost forgotten about it, to be honest. I was getting by on Social Security and my tiny pension from the hospital where I'd worked as a nurse's aide. Then one Tuesday morning, I got a call from a lawyer named Mr. Harrison Blake. Distinguished voice. Professional. Said he had good news about Jerome's estate. "Mrs. Washington," he said, "I'm pleased to inform you that the life insurance dispute has been resolved in your favor. With the investment growth over these 5 years and the additional compensation for the delay, you're looking at approximately $2.8 million. I had to sit down. Nearly $3 million. Jerome, my sweet Jerome, had left me set for life, and I never knew it. I cried that whole afternoon, missing him, wishing he was there to see it. Now, I'm not a foolish woman. I didn't tell Terrence right away. Something in my spirit said to wait, to be careful. But he found out anyway, Lord knows how. And suddenly, after 2 years of barely speaking to me, my son was at my door with Vanessa and the kids, all smiles. "Mom! Why didn't you tell us about the insurance money?" Terrence had said, hugging me tight like old times. "We're family. We should celebrate." That was 8 weeks ago. Since then, Terrence had been coming around constantly, but he wasn't coming to see me, not really. He was coming with his hand out. First, it was his business. "Mom, I need a loan from my consulting firm, just $200,000 to expand. I'll pay you back with interest." I gave it to him because he was my son, and I wanted to support his dreams. Then it was Vanessa's boutique. "She's always wanted her own store, Mom. It's only $150,000 for the startup costs." I gave that too. Then it was a new house. "We've outgrown our place, Mom. The kids need more space. We found this beautiful property for $1.2 million, but we're just $300,000 short of the down payment." Each time, I gave. Each time, I watched my nest egg shrink, but I told myself it was worth it. I was helping my family. I was being a good mother. But then things got strange. Terrence started talking to me different. Short, impatient. Like I was bothering him when I called. Vanessa stopped pretending to be nice at all, and I overheard a conversation I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd dropped by their new house, the one I'd helped them buy, with some sweet potato pie. I let myself in with the key they'd given me, calling out hello. No one answered, but I heard voices upstairs. I was about to leave the pie in the kitchen when I heard my name. "She's got to have at least another $1 million left," Vanessa was saying. "Maybe more if she hasn't blown it all on those church donations." "I know, baby, I know," Terrence replied. "I'm working on it. She'll give me the rest. She always does." "You need to push harder. Get power of attorney or something. She's old. Who knows how long we have before she does something stupid with it. Or before she dies and we actually have to wait for inheritance," Terrence laughed. It was a cold sound I'd never heard from him before. "Don't worry. I know how to handle my mother. She's easy." I left that house so quietly they never knew I'd been there. The pie stayed in my car. I drove home crying so hard I had to pull over twice. My son, my baby boy, was scheming on me, using me, waiting for me to die. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in Jerome's old chair, the one I could never bring myself to get rid of, and I prayed, asked God what to do. And somewhere in that long dark night, I got my answer. The next morning, I called Mr. Blake, the lawyer. "I need your help," I told him. "I need to invest my money somewhere my son can't touch it, and I need to do it fast." Mr. Blake was a smart man. He asked the right questions, heard the tremble in my voice, and understood without me having to spell it all out. "Mrs. Washington, I have some ideas. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" That meeting changed everything. Mr. Blake introduced me to a business broker, a sharp young woman named Kendra, who specialized in commercial properties and businesses. Over the next 6 weeks, working in complete secret, we found the perfect opportunity. Lumiere, the upscale restaurant where all of Terrence's rich friends loved to dine. The place where he'd had his business meetings, where he'd proposed to Vanessa, where he took his clients to impress them. The owner, a French man named Philippe, was retiring and wanted to sell quickly. The price was $1.8 million for the property, business, and all assets. Mr. Blake helped me structure it through an LLC so my name wouldn't immediately show up as the owner. We closed the deal exactly 1 week ago. Terrence didn't know. Nobody knew. I was now a business owner, and most of my money was safely locked up in an appreciating asset instead of sitting in an account where my son could pressure me to drain it. Then yesterday, Terrence called me. "Hey, Mom, I'm taking some colleagues out to Lumiere tomorrow night. Why don't you come? It'll be nice. We haven't spent time together lately." My stomach dropped. Of all the restaurants in the city, he picks the one I just bought. But I said yes. Something in me needed to see how he'd treat me in front of his friends, away from the pretense of family love. And that's how I ended up here, in this booth, being told I'm too poor to eat. The appetizers came, oysters and foie gras that I wasn't offered any of. Terrence and his friends laughed and drank expensive wine, talking about their stock portfolios and vacation homes in Aspen. Every so often, Terrence would glance at me like I was a piece of furniture he was embarrassed to have in the room. "So, this is your mother?" one of the men, a banker named Gerald, asked. Charming. The way he said it made it clear he meant the opposite. "Yes, well, she insisted on coming," Terrence said with a tight smile. "You know how old folks get. Lonely." I took another sip of my water. Stayed quiet. Let them talk. Vanessa showed up halfway through the meal, dressed in designer everything. She kissed Terrence and completely ignored me. Didn't even say hello. Just slid into the booth and joined the conversation like I was invisible. Dinner went on. They ordered more and more. Another round of drinks, premium wines, extra sides, dessert. The bill was climbing into the thousands. I watched it all with careful eyes, my hands folded, my face peaceful. Finally, the waiter brought the check. The table went quiet as Terrence reached for it with a confident flourish. "I've got this," he announced proudly. He looked at the total and his face went a little pale, but he recovered quickly, pulling out his platinum credit card with a show of nonchalance. The waiter took it and disappeared. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Terrence was starting to look nervous, making jokes to cover it. "Service is always so slow here, right?" Then the waiter came back, leaning down to whisper in Terrence's ear, but I could hear it just fine. "I'm sorry, sir. Your card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment?" Terrence's face went from pale to red. "That's impossible. Run it again." The waiter nodded and left. Came back 5 minutes later with the same news. "Still declined, sir. Perhaps another card?" Terrence pulled out 2 more cards. Both declined. The table was silent now, everyone awkwardly looking anywhere but at him. Vanessa's face was tight with humiliation. "There must be some mistake," Terrence said loudly. "I'm a regular here. Call your manager." "Of course, sir," the waiter said smoothly and walked away. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm. This was it. This was the moment. The manager appeared. A professional young man named Marcus that I'd met during the purchase process. He knew exactly who I was. "Is there a problem, Mr. Washington?" Marcus asked politely. "Yes, there's a problem. My cards aren't working and—" I raised my hand slightly, catching Marcus's eye. He looked at me and gave the smallest nod. "It's fine," I said, my voice quiet but clear. I reached into my purse and pulled out a black card, my new business account card. "I'll put it on my account, seeing as I just bought the restaurant this morning." The silence at that table was deafening. Terrence stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "What?" "You heard me, baby," I said, handing the card to Marcus. "Charge it to the owner's account." Marcus took the card with a respectful smile. "Of course, Mrs. Washington." "Thank you." Vanessa's mouth was literally hanging open. Gerald the banker looked confused. The rest of the table was frozen. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Terrence said, his voice rising. "This is some kind of joke, right?" "No joke, Terrence. I bought Lumiere last week. Paid cash. Well, almost cash. 1.8 million through my LLC, but who's counting?" I stood up, smoothing down my worn dress. "Marcus, please make sure these folks' bellies are full. And Terrence, honey, next time you want to tell somebody they're too poor to eat somewhere, you might want to make sure they don't own the place." I started walking toward the door, my head held high. Behind me, I could hear Terrence scrambling to his feet. "Mom, wait! I didn't mean, we need to talk about this." Oh, we'd talk all right. But first, I had a phone call to make. See, when I'd overheard that conversation at Terrence's house, I'd also made a recording on my cell phone. And I'd sent that recording to my lawyer, Mr. Blake, along with documentation of every penny I'd loaned Terrence. Turns out, none of those loans had ever been put in writing. No promissory notes, no payment plans, nothing. But they would be now, because tomorrow morning, Terrence was going to get a very official letter from my attorney detailing exactly what he owed me, with interest and a payment schedule. He was also going to find out that I'd placed the rest of my assets in an irrevocable trust that he couldn't touch. I pushed open the restaurant door and stepped out into the cool evening air. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Kendra, my business broker. "How did it go?" I smiled, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Behind me, I could hear Terrence still calling my name, his voice getting louder, more desperate. But I didn't turn around. Not yet. This was just the beginning. The phone calls started at 6 in the morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table with my coffee and my Bible, same as I did every morning, when my phone started buzzing like an angry hornet. Terrence's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately, and again, and again. On the 5th call, I answered. "Mama, please, we need to talk." Terrence's voice came through, strained and frantic. "Last night was a huge misunderstanding. I was just joking around with my friends. You know how it is. I didn't mean any of that stuff I said." I said, taking a sip of my coffee. "And this thing about you buying the restaurant? Mom, that's crazy. You spent almost $2 million without even talking to me? What if it fails? What if you lose everything?" "Then I lose everything," I said calmly. "It's my money, Terrence. Money your daddy left me, not you." There was a pause. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, harder. "We're family, Mom. Family discusses major financial decisions together. You're 72 years old. Maybe you're not thinking clearly. Maybe we should talk about getting you some help. Someone to manage your affairs." There it was. The real Terrence. The one who'd been talking to Vanessa about getting power of attorney. "I'm thinking just fine, baby. Clear as spring water. In fact, I'm thinking so clear that I've hired myself a lawyer. Nice man named Mr. Blake. You'll be hearing from him today." "A lawyer? Mom, what are you—" I hung up. My hands were shaking, but I felt strong, stronger than I'd felt in years. Mr. Blake arrived at my house at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing a suit that meant business. He was a distinguished-looking black man in his 50s, with gray at his temples and kind eyes that had seen enough to know when someone was being taken advantage of. "Mrs. Washington," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Are you ready to proceed?" "I'm ready." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd fed Terrence his breakfast every morning before school for 18 years, and went over everything. Mr. Blake had prepared a formal demand letter for the $650,000 I'd given Terrence. With interest over the time periods and proper documentation, it came to nearly $700,000 total. Now, he'll probably claim these were gifts, not loans, Mr. Blake explained. But we have several things in our favor. First, the amounts are substantial and repeated. Second, you have text messages where he promised to pay you back. Third, we have the recording of him discussing manipulation tactics with his wife. "Will that recording hold up in court?" I asked. "In this state, it's legal as long as you were a party to the conversation or in a place where you had a reasonable expectation of hearing it. You were in their home, which they'd given you a key to. We're on solid ground." He slid another document across the table. "This is the irrevocable trust we discussed. Once you sign this, all your remaining assets, approximately $1.2 million after the restaurant purchase and some liquid reserves, will be placed in a trust that you control, but that cannot be accessed by anyone else. Even if someone somehow got power of attorney over you, they couldn't touch these funds." I signed it with a steady hand. "There's one more thing. Mr. Blake said gently. Your grandchildren, Amara and Jordan. Have you considered setting up education trusts for them? My heart squeezed. Those babies. They didn't deserve to suffer because of their daddy's greed. Yes, I said. I want to do that. Something Terrence can't touch, but that'll be there for their college. Smart thinking. I'll draw up the paperwork. After Mr. Blake left, I sat in the quiet of my house for a long moment. Then I did something I should have done months ago. I called my best friend, Dolores. Dolores and I had been friends since we were both young nurses at County Hospital back in the 70s. She was the godmother to Terrence, had been at my wedding, had held my hand at Jerome's funeral. If anyone would understand, it was her. Girl, I've been wondering when you'd call, Dolores said when she answered. I heard through the grapevine that something went down at Lumiere last night. Rita's daughter works there as a hostess, and she said the gossip is flying. I told her everything. The whole story poured out of me. The insurance money, Terrence's loans that turned into a trap, the conversation I'd overheard, buying the restaurant, last night's humiliation turned triumph. Dolores was quiet for a long moment after I finished. Willa, she finally said. That's my name, Willa Washington. I'm proud of you. But baby, you know this is about to get ugly, right? Terrence isn't going to take this lying down. I know. And Vanessa, that woman is a piece of work. She's got connections, money, pride. You've embarrassed them in front of their rich friends. I know that too. Good, because you're going to need backup. What time is church on Sunday? Service starts at 10. I'll be there, and I'm bringing Rita and the prayer circle. You're not fighting this alone. I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, Dee. That's what family does. Real family. The letter from Mr. Blake was delivered to Terrence's house by courier at 2 o'clock that afternoon. I know because Vanessa called me at 2:17 and she was screaming. How dare you! She shrieked into the phone. After everything we've done for you! After we've included you in our lives! Brought the children to see you. You brought the children to see me exactly 3 times in 2 years, I said quietly. And each time, you made it clear you were doing me a favor. We gave you access to our social circle. Do you know what that's worth? About as much as respect, I suppose. Which is to say, not much at all when it's fake. You're going to regret this, you bitter old woman. We'll fight this in court. We'll prove you're not mentally competent. I hung up on her too. My hands weren't shaking this time. That evening I drove over to Lumiere. I'd arranged to meet with Marcus, the manager, and Kendra, my business broker, to go over the operations. I needed to understand what I'd bought, how it ran, what needed attention. The restaurant was closed on Tuesdays, so we had the place to ourselves. Marcus walked me through everything. The kitchen, the wine cellar, the books. The business was solid. Philippe had run it well. We had a loyal customer base, excellent staff, good profit margins. The staff is nervous, Marcus admitted. They heard about the ownership change, and they're worried about their jobs. Tell them their jobs are safe, I said. I didn't buy this place to tear it down. I bought it because I needed to protect my money, and I wanted to invest in something real, something that could grow. They'll be relieved to hear that, Marcus said. And Mrs. Washington, what you did last night with your son? The staff is all talking about it. Most of them have dealt with entitled customers like him and his friends for years. You made their whole month. I felt a warm glow in my chest. Maybe this restaurant purchase wasn't just about protecting my money. Maybe it was about something bigger. Wednesday morning, Terrence showed up at my house. I saw his expensive car pull up through my front window. He sat there for a full 5 minutes before getting out, and when he did, he looked terrible. Rumpled suit, bags under his eyes, hair uncombed, not the polished son I'd seen at the restaurant. I opened the door before he could knock. "Mama," he said, and his voice cracked. "Please, can we talk?" Against my better judgment, I let him in. We sat in my small living room. Him on the sofa, me in Jerome's old chair. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "I'm sorry," Terrence finally said. "I'm sorry for what I said at the restaurant. I'm sorry for how I've treated you. I'm sorry for all of it." "Are you sorry, Terrence? Or are you sorry you got caught?" He flinched. "I know you hurt us. That day you came to the house. I found your pie in your car later, and I realized—" He put his head in his hands. "I don't know who I've become, Mama. Vanessa's world, her family, her friends, it all got in my head. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to prove I belonged there. And somehow, I started believing that where I came from, who you are, I started being ashamed of it." "Your daddy was a postal worker," I said quietly. "I was a nurse's aide. We worked honest jobs, paid our bills, raised you in a clean home with food on the table and love in our hearts. If you're ashamed of that, then I raised you wrong." "You didn't raise me wrong. I lost my way." He looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. The little boy who used to cry when I'd leave for night shifts, scared I wouldn't come back. "But Mama, this lawsuit, $700,000? I don't have that. The business is barely breaking even. The house payment is crushing us. If you push this, you'll bankrupt me. Vanessa's already talking about divorce." "Maybe Vanessa divorcing you is the best thing that could happen," I said. "Maybe you need to remember who you really are." "I'll lose everything. The house, the business, my reputation. You'll lose things, Terrence. Material things. But maybe you'll find yourself again." "What about Amara and Jordan? You'd do this to your own grandchildren?" That landed like he intended it to. My heart twisted. "I've already set up education trusts for both of them. They'll have their college paid for, no matter what happens between us. This isn't about them." Terrence stood up, and the vulnerable look was gone. In its place was something cold and calculating. "You know what? Fine. You want to play hardball? We'll play hardball. I've already talked to a lawyer. We're going to prove that you're not mentally competent, that you're being manipulated by this Blake character. We'll get a judge to declare you unable to manage your affairs." "You can try," I said, standing up too. "But I'm 72, not senile. I've already been evaluated by a geriatric psychiatrist. Mr. Blake insisted on it before we proceeded. Dr. Chen says I'm sharp as ever. That report is already filed with the court." Terrence's face went red. "This is what you want? To destroy your own son?" "I want my son back," I said, my voice breaking. "The one I raised. The one who used to pray with me. The one who cried at his daddy's funeral and promised he'd take care of me. I want that son back, not this stranger who sees me as a bank account." "That son is gone," Terrence said coldly. "You made sure of that when you decided to humiliate me in front of my colleagues and sue me." He walked to the door, then turned back. "You're going to be alone, Mama. Completely alone. No son, no daughter-in-law, no grandchildren. Was it worth it? Was your pride worth your family?" After he left, I sat in that chair and cried harder than I'd cried since Jerome died. Because maybe he was right. Maybe I'd just traded my son for my dignity. Maybe I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. The doorbell rang an hour later. I wasn't expecting anyone, and my face was still puffy from crying. I opened the door to find two small faces staring up at me, Amara and Jordan. Behind them, looking nervous and guilty, was Terrence's younger sister, my niece Corinne. "Aunt Willa," Corinne said softly, "I heard what happened. Can we come in?" I hadn't even known Corinne was in town. She lived in Atlanta, working as a teacher. We'd been close once, but after Terrence married Vanessa, even Corinne had drifted away, caught up in her own life. "Of course, baby," I said, ushering them all inside. The kids ran to me, hugging me tight. "Grandma," Jordan said. "Daddy said we couldn't see you anymore, but Aunt Corinne said that was silly." My heart broke and healed at the same time. After I got the kids settled with juice and cookies in front of the TV, Corinne and I sat at the kitchen table. "Terrence called me this morning," she said, "ranting and raving about how you've lost your mind, how you're trying to destroy him. But Aunt Willa, I know my cousin. I've watched him change over the years, and I heard some things from Vanessa's sister, we're friends on social media, that made me sick." "What kind of things?" "Vanessa's been bragging to her family about how easy it was to get you to hand over money. She called you a—" Corinne's voice caught. "She called you a gullible old fool who's too emotional about family to see straight." The words hurt, but they didn't surprise me. "I picked up the kids from school today before Terrence could stop me," Corinne continued. "He doesn't even know they're here. I figured you deserved to see your grandbabies, and they deserve to see you. Whatever's happening between you and Terrence, these children love you." "Thank you," I whispered. We spent the afternoon together, the four of us. I helped Amara with her homework. I played cards with Jordan. We made dinner together, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and garlic bread, and sat around my small table laughing and talking like a real family. At 7 o'clock, Corinne's phone started ringing. Terrence. She didn't answer. It rang 5 more times. "I should get them home," she said reluctantly, "before he calls the police or something." As we were getting the kids' things together, Amara tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma," she said, "are you and Daddy fighting?" I knelt down to her level, looking into her sweet 8-year-old face. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements, baby. But no matter what happens between me and your daddy, I will always love you and your brother. Always. You understand?" She nodded, tears in her eyes. "Daddy said you don't love us anymore, that you chose money over us." The rage that went through me in that moment could have powered the whole city. "Your daddy is wrong," I said firmly. "I chose to protect myself from being used. That's different. And I've made sure you and Jordan will have money for college someday, no matter what. That's how much I love you." After they left, I sat in my quiet house, exhausted but strangely energized. Terrence was fighting dirty, using the children as weapons. But I had allies now. Corinne, Dolores, Mr. Blake, Marcus and the restaurant staff, my church family. I wasn't alone. Friday morning, I got a call from Mr. Blake. "Mrs. Washington, we have a problem. Terrence has filed a countersuit. He's claiming elder abuse, that you're being manipulated by me, that I've convinced you to make unsound financial decisions, and that I'm stealing from you." My blood ran cold. "Can he do that?" "He can file whatever he wants. Whether it'll hold up is another matter. But Willa, I need to tell you something. This is going to get nasty. Very nasty. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Amara's tears, about Jordan's confusion, about the son I'd raised and the stranger he'd become, about Jerome, who'd worked 35 years so I'd be taken care of, and how Terrence was trying to take that away. "I'm prepared," I said. "Let's fight." "Good, because the hearing is scheduled for Monday morning. And Willa, Terrence has hired Bradford Hughes." I gasped. Even I knew that name. Bradford Hughes was the most expensive, most ruthless lawyer in the state. He defended millionaires in divorce court and white-collar criminals in fraud cases. He didn't lose. "How is Terrence affording him?" I asked. "Vanessa's father is paying. This isn't just about the money anymore. This is about pride, about power, about them not wanting to be embarrassed." "Then let's not disappoint them," I said grimly. That Sunday, I went to church. First Baptist, same church I'd attended for 40 years. Same church where Jerome and I had gotten married, where we'd dedicated baby Terrence, where I'd cried through Jerome's funeral service. When I walked in, the whole congregation seemed to be waiting. Dolores grabbed me and pulled me into a hug. Then Rita, then Sister Patterson and Brother Miles and Mrs. Chen from the choir. And suddenly I was surrounded by faces I'd known for decades, all of them telling me they'd heard, They were praying. They were there for me. Pastor Williams, a young man who'd only been at our church for 5 years, but who had wisdom beyond his years, pulled me aside after service. "Sister Willa," he said, "I understand you're going through a trial. A legal one and a spiritual one." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Remember Job," he said. "Tested in every way, but he kept his faith. Your breakthrough is coming. Don't give up now." I went home that afternoon feeling stronger. I read my Bible, I prayed. I prepared my heart for whatever Monday would bring. Sunday night at 11:47 p.m. my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mrs. Washington?" A woman's voice, young and scared. "Yes? Who is this?" "My name is Shanice. I work at your son's company. Well, I used to. He fired me last week." She took a shaky breath. "I saw the news about the lawsuit, about him saying you're mentally incompetent and being manipulated. Mrs. Washington, I have information about what your son has been doing, about how he's been running his business, and I think you need to know before that court hearing." My heart started pounding. What kind of information? The kind that could put him in prison. I met Shanice at a diner on the other side of town at 7 o'clock Monday morning, 3 hours before the court hearing. She was a young black woman, maybe 25, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, looking over her shoulder like she expected someone to jump out at her. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Her hands were shaking as she pulled a manila folder from her backpack. "I've been carrying this around since he fired me, trying to figure out what to do with it." "What is it?" I asked. "Proof that your son's consulting company is a fraud. Well, not completely a fraud, but close enough." She opened the folder, spreading papers across the table. I was his bookkeeper for 2 years. At first, everything seemed normal, but about 6 months ago, things started getting weird. She pointed to a spreadsheet. "See these invoices? These are bills to clients for services rendered. But Mrs. Washington, those services were never actually provided. He'd bill companies for consulting work, for reports, for analysis, and then he'd either deliver something minimal or nothing at all. When clients complained, he'd smooth talk them, give them partial refunds, or threaten legal action." My stomach turned. "How much money are we talking about?" "At least $400,000 over the past 6 months, maybe more. These are just the ones I could document." She pulled out more papers. "And that's not even the worst part. See this? He's been using shell companies to move money around. Companies that don't really exist except on paper. I think he's been hiding assets, maybe preparing for a divorce or maybe just evading taxes. I'm not sure." "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" Shanice's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was scared. Your son, Mrs. Washington, I'm sorry to say this, but he threatened me. When I asked questions about the invoices, he said if I told anyone, he'd make sure I never worked in this city again. He'd destroy my reputation, claim I was stealing from him, fabricate evidence. He has connections, money, lawyers. I'm just a girl from the East Side trying to pay off student loans." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Not anymore. Now you've got me." "There's one more thing," she said. "The $650,000 you gave him? I saw all of it. The loans for the business, for the boutique, for the house down payment. I tracked where it went. Want to know what he did with it?" "Tell me." "Most of it went to paying off his gambling debts." The world seemed to tilt. "Gambling?" "High-stakes poker games, private clubs. He'd go twice a week, sometimes more. Vanessa doesn't even know. He told her he was at business meetings. He won sometimes, but mostly he lost. Big. He owed some dangerous people money, Mrs. Washington. Your loans saved him from something bad." I sat back, my mind reeling. My son, my baby boy. Not just greedy and manipulative, but a liar, a fraud, a gambling addict. How had I not seen it? "Will you testify?" I asked. In court today? Shanice bit her lip. If I do, he'll destroy me. If you don't, he'll destroy me. And then he'll destroy the next person, and the next. Shanice, baby, sometimes doing the right thing costs us something, but the cost of doing nothing is always higher. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. I called Mr. Blake immediately. He arrived at the diner 20 minutes later, looking sharp in his court suit. When Shanice showed him the evidence, his eyes went wide. This changes everything, he said. Mrs. Washington, with your permission, I'd like to bring in a colleague, a criminal attorney. Because if even half of this is true, your son isn't just facing a civil lawsuit. He could be facing criminal charges. The courthouse was downtown, a big intimidating building where I'd never set foot in my 72 years. Mr. Blake walked me through security, his hand steady on my elbow. Shanice came in separately, her evidence locked in Mr. Blake's briefcase. In the hallway outside the courtroom, I saw them. Terrence and Vanessa, dressed like they were going to a wedding. Bradford Hughes stood with them, a tall white man with silver hair and a suit that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. He had that look about him, like he'd never lost anything in his life and didn't plan to start today. When Terrence saw me, his face hardened. Vanessa whispered something in his ear, and he shook his head. They didn't come over, didn't speak to me, just stared like I was the enemy. My heart broke all over again. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Freeman. Judge Freeman was a black woman in her 60s, with gray locks pulled back in a neat bun and reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked at both parties with the kind of eyes that had seen every trick in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. I've reviewed the filings in this case, she said, her voice crisp and clear. Mr. Washington, you're claiming that your mother is mentally incompetent and that her attorney, Mr. Blake, has manipulated her into making unsound financial decisions. Is that correct? Bradford Hughes stood. Yes, Your Honor. We believe Mrs. Washington is suffering from diminished capacity and that Mr. Blake has taken advantage of her vulnerable state to enrich himself and damage his client's relationship with her family. And Mrs. Washington, you claim that your son owes you approximately $700,000 in loans and that you were financially competent when you made both those loans and your recent business purchase. Correct? Mr. Blake stood. Yes, Your Honor. We also have new evidence that speaks to Mr. Terrence Washington's character and his motivations in bringing this suit. Judge Freeman raised an eyebrow. New evidence? Yes, Your Honor. We have a witness who worked for Mr. Washington's company and can testify to fraudulent business practices, misuse of client funds, and the true purpose of the loans he received from his mother. Bradford Hughes jumped up. Your Honor, this is an ambush. We were never informed of any such witness. The witness came forward yesterday evening, Your Honor, Mr. Blake said calmly. We informed opposing counsel by email at 6 a.m. this morning, as soon as we verified her information. Judge Freeman looked at Hughes. Did you receive the email? Hughes checked his phone, his face reddening. Yes, Your Honor, but... Then it's not an ambush. I'll allow the witness. But first, let's hear from the psychiatrist. Dr. Chen, please take the stand. Dr. Chen was a small Asian woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She testified that she'd evaluated me extensively, cognitive tests, memory assessments, psychological screening, and found me to be completely competent. In fact, Dr. Chen said, Mrs. Washington scored higher on cognitive function tests than many people half her age. She's sharp, articulate, and fully capable of managing her own affairs. But she's making unusual financial decisions, Bradford Hughes said on cross-examination. Buying a restaurant on a whim? Giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars and then demanding it back? These aren't the actions of a sound mind. Actually, Dr. Chen said, these are the actions of someone who was being exploited and then took steps to protect herself. That shows excellent judgment, not diminished capacity. Hughes sat down, looking less confident. Then it was Shanice's turn. She walked to the stand with her head high, and I was proud of her. She swore to tell the truth, and then she told it all. The fraudulent invoicing, the shell companies, the gambling debts, the threats, everything. I watched Terrence's face go from red to white to gray. Vanessa kept whispering urgently to Hughes, who looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. "Your Honor," Mr. Blake said, "we have documentation for everything Ms. Shanice has testified to. Bank records, invoices, emails. Mr. Terrence Washington didn't need loans from his mother for business expansion. He needed them to pay off gambling debts and cover up fraud. He manipulated a 72-year-old woman out of her life savings by lying about his intentions." Judge Freeman looked at Terrence. "Mr. Washington, do you wish to respond to these allegations?" Terrence stood up, and for a moment, he looked like he might say something, but then Bradford Hughes put a hand on his arm and whispered in his ear. Terrence sat back down. "Your Honor," Hughes said, standing, "my client wishes to invoke his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination regarding the business allegations. However, we maintain that the issue before the court today is Mrs. Washington's competency, not my client's business practices." "Actually," Judge Freeman said coldly, "the issue before this court is whether your client's petition to declare his mother incompetent has any merit, and based on what I've heard today, it does not even close." She looked at me directly. "Mrs. Washington, I find that you are completely competent to manage your own affairs. The petition for guardianship is denied." I felt tears of relief stream down my face. "Furthermore," Judge Freeman continued, "regarding the civil suit for repayment of loans, Mr. Blake, I assume you'll be pursuing that in a separate action?" "Yes, Your Honor." "I encourage both parties to settle, because, Mr. Washington, based on what I've heard today, if this goes to trial, you're going to lose. Badly. And given the evidence of potential fraud that's been presented, I'm obligated to refer this matter to the district attorney's office for review." The gavel came down. It was over. In the hallway, Terrence tried to approach me. "Mom, please." But Vanessa grabbed his arm, her face twisted with fury. "Don't," she hissed. "We're done with her. Come on." She dragged him toward the exit, and I watched my son walk away, his shoulders slumped, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume. Bradford Hughes approached Mr. Blake. "My clients would like to discuss a settlement." "I'm sure they would," Mr. Blake said dryly. Over the next week, we negotiated. Through lawyers, never face-to-face. In the end, Terrence agreed to pay back $400,000 over 5 years, less than what he owed, but more than I expected to ever see. The restaurant and the boutique were both failing, buried in debt. The big house was going into foreclosure. Vanessa had filed for divorce. My son had lost everything. But I couldn't feel sorry for him. Not yet. Maybe someday. The district attorney did investigate Terrence's business practices. He ended up pleading guilty to fraud charges, a deal that kept him out of prison but required restitution to his victims, community service, and probation. His business license was revoked. His reputation in the business community was destroyed. 3 months after the court hearing, I was at Lumiere on a Thursday evening, going over the books with Marcus. The restaurant was doing well. Better than well, actually. After word got out about what had happened, how I'd bought the place and stood up to my son, we'd become something of a sensation. People wanted to support me. The local news did a story. We were booked solid every weekend. "Mrs. Washington," Marcus said, "we might need to think about expansion. Maybe a second location?" I smiled. "Let's walk before we run, Marcus. But I like your thinking." The door chimed, and I looked up to see Corinne walking in with Amara and Jordan. My heart leaped. "Surprise, Grandma!" Jordan yelled, running to me. I hugged them both tight, breathing in their little kid smell of shampoo and sunshine. "What are you doing here?" "Corinne brought us," Amara said. "She said we could have dinner with you if you weren't too busy." "I'm never too busy for you two," I said, tears in my eyes. We ate dinner together in a corner booth, mac and cheese for the kids, salmon for me and Corinne. We laughed and talked, and for a little while, everything felt right. "How's your daddy?" I asked Amara gently. She shrugged. "He's living in an apartment now. He seems sad all the time. He asks about you sometimes." My heart squeezed. "What do you tell him?" "That we love you, and that we love him too. But that he needs to say he's sorry for real." Out of the mouths of babes. After dinner, as I was walking them to the car, Amara tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma? Daddy said you hate him now. That's not true, is it?" I knelt down, looking into her sweet face. "Baby, I could never hate your daddy. I love him. I'll always love him. But sometimes loving someone means not letting them hurt you anymore. Sometimes love has to be tough to be real." "Will he ever get better?" Jordan asked quietly. "I hope so, sweetheart. I pray for it every night. But that's up to him. He has to want to change." 6 months after the court hearing, on a Sunday after church, I found an envelope tucked into my Bible. No name, no return address. Inside was a card with a single sentence written in Terrence's handwriting. "I'm sorry, Mama. I'm getting help. Maybe one day you can forgive me." I held that card and cried. Because maybe there was hope after all. Maybe my son wasn't completely lost. Maybe this was his rock bottom, and from here the only way was up. I didn't respond. Not yet. The wound was still too fresh. But I kept the card in my Bible, and every night when I prayed for Terrence, for his healing, for his redemption. For the son I knew was still in there somewhere, buried under the greed and the pride and the mistakes. A year after buying Lumiere, I stood in my restaurant on a Friday night, watching the dining room buzz with life. At one table, an elderly couple celebrated their anniversary. At another, a young family with 3 kids laughed over pasta. In the corner booth, a group of church ladies from First Baptist had their monthly dinner meeting. Marcus came up beside me. "You look happy, Mrs. Washington." "I am happy," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in a long time, I really am. My phone buzzed. A text from Corinne. "Kids want to know if they can spend next weekend with you. I'll bring them Friday after school." I texted back, "Yes, I'll make my fried chicken." I looked around my restaurant, my investment, my protection, my future. I thought about Jerome, who'd worked so hard so I'd be safe. I thought about Terrence, who'd tried to take that safety away. And I thought about myself, the 72-year-old woman who'd found the strength to fight back. Sometimes life breaks you down. Sometimes the people you love most betray you. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. But sometimes, if you're brave enough, if you're strong enough, if you're willing to stand up for yourself, you come out the other side not just surviving, but thriving. I'd lost my son, at least for now. But I'd found myself. I'd found my dignity. I'd found my strength. And you know what? That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. That's all for today's story. If this touched your heart, please subscribe and share your own experiences below. We're all in this together.